Good news! The Video Game History Foundation is now the proud owner of Computer Entertainer, one of our favorite video game magazines. I don't mean we bought a set on eBay to add to the library, I mean that we own the rights to Computer Entertainer, and in a way, you kinda do too, because we're releasing it as a public utility to use for free however you want. Let's back up and talk about what makes Computer Entertainer so compelling. Back in the 1970s, at the start of the video game industry, there weren't dedicated video game magazines as we know them today. There were other magazines that might have covered video games in the backs of the issues, but there wasn't the concept of a dedicated video game magazine. That is, until late 1981 with the introduction of Electronic Games, which as far as we can tell, is the first magazine just for video game players published in the United States. Soon after, a bunch of other video game magazines sprung up. There was Joystick, Video Gaming Illustrated, Electronic Fun. There was one that was just called Video Games. Cream, the rock and roll magazine, had one called Vidiot. And then in the middle of all this was a simple black and white newsletter, Computer Entertainer. First released in 1982, Computer Entertainer, or the Video Game Update as it was known at the time, was run by two sisters, Marylou Badeaux and Celeste Dolan. Not only is this one of the first video game magazines, it's almost certainly the first video game magazine run by women, which is really cool. The Video Game Update was a newsletter that spun out of the two sisters' mail order business, Video Takeout. The two of them went to CES in January of 1982 and were so excited by the new video games that were coming out that they were soon to sell to their customers that they printed out a little one-sheet and included it in a catalog. This is actually a photocopy of that first issue. We believe all the originals are lost at this point. They started doing this regularly, and by July it had become a fully fledged newsletter with reviews, previews, and news about the video game industry. As a side note, Video Takeout was actually a side hustle for Marylou. Her day job was actually at Warner Brothers. She was a record executive, and she managed Prince, as in, yes, that Prince, his royal badness. She even wrote a book about it. Like we said, there were a lot of video game magazines in the early 80s, so what makes this one so special? Well, as a lot of you know, by 1983, the video game industry started falling apart in what historians often call the video game crash. As companies started going under, the magazines went down with them, and by 1985, there weren't video game magazines left to read. Except this one. Though it had switched focus to be primarily about home computer games, Computer Entertainer continued covering the console video game industry through 1990. I often call 1985 to 1988 the dark ages of home video game coverage in the US. The NES hadn't really exploded yet, so there wasn't really anyone doing it. To the best of our knowledge, this was the only publication that regularly covered home console games through that period. One great example of what makes that so remarkable is actually featured in literally every issue of this magazine. Every issue had a calendar in the back that would explain every game that was coming out along with its release date. The two sisters, again, they were selling these games by mail, so they were on top of it. If you look up basically any video game that came out in the 1980s on Wikipedia, chances are that the release date that's listed there came from this source. They were also one of the only outlets still reviewing console video games during this period. If you want to know what an American thought about Metroid or The Legend of Zelda when it first arrived, this is one of the few resources that you can tap into. If you want to know what someone thought about Super Mario Bros. When it was brand new, this might be the only English language review. I've been talking about this magazine for a long time, ever since I first found Marylou back in 2012 and she graciously loaned me her bound volumes. That's me actually talking about these same volumes soon after they'd arrived for a documentary. I was experimenting with sideburns at the time, a decision I now regret. This was back before the Video Game History Foundation existed, so I didn't have a lot of resources at my disposal. But I wanted to get them scanned and online the best way I could, so we got them online using a traditional book scanner. Now, this got the job done, but not really to my satisfaction. Once you get into the middle of a thick volume like this, it's impossible for book scanners to get into the margins. So the scans as they are online are literally missing some words. Also, it turned out there were 7 issues that we were missing. 1990 was the final year of the publication, and it folded after the July issue, and neither Marylou nor Celeste had kept any copies of those, so what was online was incomplete. Now that we own the rights to the magazine, we actually acquired Celeste's bound volumes as well, so we made the difficult decision to debind one of the sets so that we could scan the pages properly. I won't lie, I kind of hated having to do that, but this magazine is so rare that we didn't really have much of a choice, and I think the results are definitely worth it. And hey, good news, we actually located those final 7 issues. It turned out that my friend Leonard Herman, the author of Phoenix, one of the first video game history books ever, was a subscriber at the time and still had his full set in his home. I visited him recently and sat at his kitchen table for hours scanning every page while he patiently waited for me, so thank you, Lenny, appreciate that. We've released the entire run into the Creative Commons under an attribution license. What this means is that if you want to use Computer Entertainer in your videos, read it on Twitch, feature it in a commercial project like a documentary or a book, all you have to do is credit the Video Game History Foundation, and you can use it for free for whatever you want. If you'd like to learn more about Computer Entertainer and where it came from, check out our podcast, The Video Game History Hour, where we conducted the first ever interview with Marylou Badeaux about this magazine.
I basically hired her to run the mail order company, take the orders, and we would have a kid in the neighborhood come in once or twice a week and package the stuff up. I mean, this was real homegrown stuff, okay?
Unfortunately, we never got Celeste's side of the story. We actually lost Celeste Dolan earlier this year. But I know from talking to Marylou that Computer Entertainer was really important to her. So my hope is that by putting this out there for everybody and by all of you reading it and enjoying it, we'll be honoring her memory together. Every issue of Computer Entertainer is now available to read, search, and download at the Video Game History Foundation's digital library. If you'd like a print edition, we're looking into it. We're not sure that we can convince a printer to print 1,000 plus pages of an old video game magazine, but we're trying. If you'd like to be informed if and when that happens, the best way to do that is to sign up for our email list at gamehistory.org/email. And the best way to encourage us to make that happen is to leave a comment below to let us know that you're interested. No exaggeration, we literally could not have done this without your support. The Video Game History Foundation is a charity, and most of our funding comes from individual donors, just like yourself. If you think video game history is important, if you appreciate the kind of work that we do around here, we'd love to have you join us, either with a one-time donation or an ongoing membership to our Patreon. If you're able and interested, head on over to gamehistory.org/donate to get started. I'm Frank Cifaldi, and I'll see you next time here at the Video Game History Foundation.